Welcome back to the deep dive. We've had quite a lot of material sent our way this week.
We certainly have.
And today, we're diving headfirst into something really dense, a very specific analytical framework.
Yeah, this is a big one.
We're basically attempting a huge task today, giving you a fast, comprehensive overview, the TLDR, if you will, of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 99.
That's the goal. Simon Dixon's latest, over 3 hours long, went live Friday, September 26th. A lot to unpack.
Definitely. So for anyone who couldn't sit through the whole thing, we're distilling his analysis of Donald Trump's recent UN speech.
But crucially, looking at it through a very specific, ruthless financial lens. That's the mission here.
Right, because when leaders talk about, national strength, global order, it's easy to get caught up in the words, the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you translate that political speech into the raw language of, say, asset management, bond auctions, geopolitical leverage?
And that's exactly what this source material attempts. It sets up this framework it calls the Proof of Weapons Network, the POW network.
The POW network.
Okay.
So this deep dive, fundamentally, it's about following the money, trying to strip away the surface narrative.
To see what financial and geopolitical goals might be playing out underneath the headlines.
Precisely. And the conclusion Dixon reaches in the source analysis, it's pretty stark.
How so?
Well, the speech, framed as American strength, is interpreted as something else entirely.
Meaning
It's seen as part of a carefully managed transition, one signaling the beginning of, well, the post-dollar era.
and a covert alignment, the analysis suggests, with this wider POW network agenda.
An agenda that, according to the source, doesn't necessarily prioritize traditional national interests as we might think of it.
Okay, so before we even touch the speech itself, we absolutely have to get a handle on this core concept, the POW network.
Right. It's the analytical tool used throughout the source.
It's not presented as like a government body or some simple conspiracy theory.
No, not exactly. The analysis defines it as the global fiat money system itself. Okay, so what does that actually encompass? Central banks? Big finance?
Yes, exactly. It's the whole amalgamation. Central banks, the big Western financial institutions, the huge asset managers, think BlackRock, and, crucially, the military-industrial complex.
All intertwined.
Deeply intertwined. It's seen as a stateless global group. Its power, the analysis argues, comes from blurring the lines between national security and corporate profit.
Okay, stateless. Blurring lines. And its function. The outline mentions something pretty chilling.
Yeah, the source boils it down to this. Fuel conflict, extract wealth, concentrate power into fewer and fewer hands.
And the big one, ensuring the world stays dependent on dollar debt.
That's the linchpin, dollar debt dependency. Operationally, the analysis claims this network controls what it calls the collective West.
So Europe, America, Canada, Australia, Israel?
Those are the core examples given.
Yeah.
But even within that sphere of control, there's an internal dynamic. Two main factions sort of jostling.
Ah, okay, two factions. Let's break those down. Because the outline suggests they're key to understanding how different figures, like maybe a Trump or a Netanyahu, might seem to have different goals.
But ultimately serve the same underlying system. Yes, that's the argument.
So faction one.
The financial industrial complex. Think deal makers, financiers, the asset managers, private equity, figures like Trump in this analysis.
Their focuses.
Primarily financial, increasing stock prices, optimizing debt structures, getting those big reconstruction contracts after conflicts, financial acquisition, wealth concentration.
Got it. And the other side?
The military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
Their focus is perpetual conflict, the forever wars.
Right, ensuring constant demand for weapons, hardware, and forcing the dollar standard globally through military might.
Exactly. And the source argues these two factions need each other. They're symbiotic within this POW network framework.
How so?
The military secures the resources, the oil flows, enforces the debt system. The financiers then manage and recycle the profits generated by that system, often back into funding the military side or propping up markets. It's a loop.
It's a difficult idea to accept that the system might be designed for conflict, maybe even a eventual self-destruction rather than stability.
It is. And that's why the historical context provided in the source is so important. It frames the post-WWII Bretton Woods system very differently.
Not as an attempt at stability.
No. The analysis calls it an elaborate scheme. A scam, essentially, to lure the world into that dollar debt dependency we mentioned.
Wow, okay. How did that supposedly work?
Well, the foundation, according to the source, was America acquiring a huge amount of the world's gold. maybe 75%.
How?
Partly by confiscating its own citizens' gold back in the Depression, partly by acquiring colonial gold reserves after the war. This hoard let the U.S. build the manufacturing base needed to fund global conflicts and project power.
And the UN's role in this view?
The analysis calls the UN an essential weapon created at that time, a tool to institutionalize U.S. financial dominance under a veneer of international cooperation.
Then comes 1971, the Nixon shock. Closing the gold window, that's the pivot point.
Absolutely critical moment. It cut the final ties. No more restraint, basically.
So the dollar became purely, what, fiat?
Pure fiat. Backed. The analysis argues only by the U.S. military, its technological edge, and the institutional power of the POW network.
And this locked the U.S. into needing perpetual deficits.
Perpetual twin deficits, yes. Fiscal deficits, spending more than taxing. And trade deficits, importing more than exporting.
Why are those required?
Because to be the world reserve currency, the dollar has to be constantly exported to the rest of the world as debt.
So if the U.S. ever actually balanced its books?
The whole global dollar system, as structured, would seize up and potentially collapse overnight, according to this analysis. It needs that outflow of debt.
Okay, which brings us to today. This system's dominance is visibly cracking. We hear about de-dollarization all the time.
And the source argues it's happening systematically now. Regional blocs are forming specifically to challenge the POW network and reset the world order.
BRICS, obviously. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Plus the new members, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, major energy and population centers joining forces.
And the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, also making moves.
Yes, they're all actively working to de-dollarize trade, set up alternative payment systems, and challenge that debt-based control.
Now, here's where the analysis gets really controversial, connecting this to the war in Ukraine.
Extremely controversial, yes.
The claim is the war was engineered specifically to throw Europe under the bus. That sounds drastic.
It does. But the financial logic presented in the source is this. It's a survival tactic for the dollar system, for the POW network.
How does sacrificing Europe help the dollar survive?
By creating massive instability in Europe, cutting off its cheap Russian energy, you achieve several things simultaneously from the POW network's perspective.
Okay, like
Now,
what?
1, you crash European manufacturing competitiveness. 2, you force Europe into deeper dependence on expensive U.S. liquefied natural gas.
And 3?
3, you force them to massively increase spending on U.S. military hardware to defend themselves. This vassalizes Europe.
So Europe becomes a captive market, propping up the dollar through energy purchases and weapon sales, fueling both factions of the POW network.
That's the grim calculus presented. Europe, in this framework, is the sacrifice pawn used to buy the declining dollar system more time.
All right, let's shift from the big geopolitical picture to the macroeconomics underpinning it. The analysis uses the term fiscal dominance.
Yes, that's the core strategy described for the current economy.
So for our listeners who understand the technicals, what does that mean? What levers are being pulled and why now?
Fiscal dominance is basically when the government's spending and debt needs dictate monetary policy, overriding the central bank's traditional goals like inflation control.
So the Treasury's needs trump the Fed's independence, essentially.
In effect, yes. It involves printing the absolute maximum amount of money feasible, think quantitative easing, maybe even direct monetization down the line.
And auctioning off huge amounts of government debt.
The maximum amount the market can possibly absorb, and maybe even more. Because, the analysis stresses, the system requires ever-increasing debt. Trying to reduce it would cause a seizure.
Okay, so you print all this money, issue all this debt. How does it get recycled to achieve the POW network's goals, according to the source?
Through targeted spending. Crony capitalism bills, essentially.
Like the big infrastructure or inflation reduction acts we've seen.
Exactly. The source mentions things like a hypothetical $1.03 big, beautiful bill. These massive pieces of legislation act as conduits.
Funneling liquidity where?
Directly back into large corporations, often via government contracts, defense, tech, green energy, whatever the favored sector is.
And the guaranteed outcome of that injection.
Artificially propped up stock markets. That's the primary observable effect highlighted.
Now, the analysis assigns a specific role to Trump within this, as part of that financial industrial complex faction.
Yes, his role is framed as being the funnel master, almost.
Meaning?
He's adept at directing that freshly printed money, often through the banking system, into those specific corporations favored by the POW network's financial wing.
which drives up their stock prices.
Enriching executives, the big asset managers like BlackRock who hold those stocks, major shareholders, it keeps the asset bubble inflated.
And this whole strategy requires running the economy hot.
Absolutely. Constantly increasing the national debt, what is it now, over $37 trillion,
Somewhere around there, yeah.
and deliberately perpetuating those twin deficits, fiscal and trade, because, as we discussed, the system needs them.
The inevitable social consequence of running things this hot, the analysis argues, is the K-shaped economy.
We hear that term a lot, yes.
Let's unpack the mechanism described in this source. How does this create that divergence?
It's fairly straightforward, sadly. The K-shape represents two diverging paths. The top arm goes up.
That's the people who own assets.
Exactly. Stocks, real estate, maybe gold, Bitcoin. Their assets tend to appreciate faster than inflation, especially when the system is being flooded with liquidity. So they get exponentially richer in real terms.
And the bottom arm of the K.
That goes down. That's everyone else. People relying on wages, savers holding cash or bonds, those forced to borrow just to consume.
Why do they fall behind?
Because they pay the cumulative inflation tax. The value of their savings, their purchasing power, is constantly eroded by the very inflation generated by running the economy hot.
So inflation isn't just some unfortunate side effect here.
According to this analysis, absolutely not. It's a deliberate tool, a feature, not a bug.
A tool for wealth extraction. The source mentions something technical about the interest on newly created debt.
Right. This is a crucial point in the analysis of why inflation is necessary for the system's survival.
Explain that bit.
When new debt is created, say, by the government issuing bonds, the principal amount is created. But the money needed to pay the interest on that principal doesn't exist yet. It hasn't been created.
Okay, so where does the interest payment come from?
It has to come from issuing new, even larger amounts of debt.
Which sounds exactly like
A Ponzi scheme. That's precisely what the analysis calls it. A debt-based Ponzi.
And inflation is the mechanism that allows this.
Inflation is the necessary consequence. It devalues the existing debt, making it easier to service, while also acting as that hidden tax on the populace, extracting wealth to help fund the ever-growing interest payments. It keeps the POW network solvent at the expense of everyone holding the currency.
Okay, let's apply this lens now to some of Trump's specific bragging points from that UN speech, as interpreted by the source. First up, tariff revenue.
Yeah, he presented it as a win, boosting the national coffers.
But the analysis sees it differently, as a hidden tax that actually favors consolidation.
Exactly. The argument is, who really pays the tariffs? Primarily, it's American corporations, and especially small businesses, importing goods. Their costs go up.
But large multinationals.
They have options. They can negotiate offsets with suppliers, restructure their supply chains internationally, pass costs more easily to consumers, or even absorb the hit temporarily.
So the impact isn't uniform.
Not at all. The net result, the analysis claims, is that smaller businesses struggle or fail under the increased costs. Market share consolidates upwards.
And who benefits from that consolidation?
The big players. Often, the analysis points out, the very large asset managers like BlackRock end up acquiring these distressed smaller companies or their assets on the cheap, increasing their overall market power.
Okay, next bragging point, the record stock market.
Always a big one. Presented as proof of economic health.
But the source views it as artificial, divorced from reality.
Completely. An accounting illusion, essentially.
Yeah.
Driven not by fundamental growth or productivity, but by that fiscal dominance we talked about.
How so? The mechanism.
Government debt spending. Billions funneled into specific companies. The source mentions examples like Palantir for surveillance tech, Lockheed Martin for weapons, maybe even Musk's ventures, like X for space contracts.
That cash injection goes straight onto their balance sheets.
Right, which inflates earnings per share, justifies stock buybacks, and pushes the stock price up, regardless of whether the underlying business is genuinely creating more value or just receiving government largesse.
So it looks like prosperity, but it's really just debt being recycled into asset prices.
To enrich the asset holding class, yes. That's the interpretation.
Then there's the claim of $17 trillion in foreign direct investment, FDI. Huge number.
Sounds impressive, right? Investment flowing into America.
But again, the analysis flips the script. It's not seen as growth, but as asset stripping.
Precisely. The argument is that a significant chunk of this claimed FDI, especially from places like China or the Middle East, GCC countries,
Represents what?
represents foreign powers, often partnering strategically with Western asset managers like BlackRock, buying up American assets, infrastructure, corporations, real estate.
So it's a reversal of the old model, where the U.S. used the IMF or private equity to acquire assets abroad.
Exactly. The source calls it reverse neocolonialism. As the dollar system weakens, other power blocks, BRICS, GCC, are using their accumulated dollars, or partnering with the insiders, to strategically acquire pieces of the American economy itself, leveraging America's own debt against it.
And the final point here, the big push for AI and robotics in the budget.
Presented as necessary for future competitiveness, innovation.
But the source highlights a darker side effect.
Yes, the analysis argues the POW network needs automation because the U.S. economy, distorted by debt and inflation, has become too expensive for traditional manufacturing labor.
You need robots if wages are too high or if you want to onshore manufacturing.
Right. But the deliberate side effect, the source claims, is the generation of widespread unemployment or underemployment among the human workforce,
Deepening that K-shaped divide again.
explicitly sacrificing Main Street's economic well-being for Wall Street's capital gains and efficiency targets. That's the brutal assessment.
Okay, let's shift focus back to the geopolitical stage, using this POW network lens. Trump's critique of the UN in his speech, the analysis calls it profound gaslighting.
Strong words, yeah.
Why gaslighting? I mean, lots of people feel the UN is ineffective on many issues.
The source argues it's gaslighting because of the historical context. Specifically, the U.S.'s own role in making the UN ineffective when it suited its interests,
How so?
by systematically using its Security Council veto power. The analysis specifically cites blocking resolutions aimed at achieving lasting peace between Israel and Palestine, for example.
Because that peace might run counter to the interests of the military-industrial complex. Less conflict, less weapon sales, less justification for regional military presence.
That's the direct implication made in the source material. The UN isn't seen as accidentally ineffective. Its impotence on certain key issues, particularly those threatening the conflict-driven status quo, is presented as a feature, enforced by the U.S. veto when necessary.
Okay, this leads directly to a really bold prediction made in the source.
Which is?
That Trump is likely going to receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, that's in there.
Why would the POW network using this framework want that for him? Seems counterintuitive if the goal is managed chaos.
It's all about the optics, the narrative control needed for this managed transition away from the old dollar system.
How does a Peace Prize help that?
It creates this powerful public image of success, stability, American strength under his leadership, the very themes of his speech. It provides cover.
Cover for what?
For the underlying turbulent financial reset and dollar destabilization that's actually happening behind the scenes. It helps sell the necessary geopolitical shifts to the public, both domestically and internationally. It's narrative management on a grand scale.
Okay. Now, Trump also listed, 7 unendable wars he claimed to have ended?
Cambodia, Thailand, Kosovo, Serbia, Congo, Rwanda, Pakistan, India, Israel, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. Quite the list.
The analysis dismisses this as posturing. Let's take one example they focused on, Congo, Rwanda.
Right.
The source argues this wasn't really about ending a traditional war, but about managing resource theft.
Exactly. The conflict in the eastern Congo, the analysis claims, is primarily driven by the extraction of critical resources. Coltan for smartphones, cobalt for batteries, etc. Resources needed for Western tech companies, Apple is mentioned.
And this extraction is done how?
Through proxy militias like M23, which the source alleges are funded and supported by Western proxy states in the region, with Rwanda often cited as the key intermediary.
So the goal isn't peace, but
Controlled chaos. Just enough instability to prevent the Congo from developing its own capacity to process and manufacture using its resources, while allowing Western corporations, via these proxies, to extract them cheaply.
So when Trump claims to be a peace broker there,
the analysis frames it as him negotiating the exit deal for the financial-industrial complex once the necessary resources have been secured or the geopolitical calculation changes. It's managing the extraction, not ending conflict for humanitarian reasons.
what about Pakistan, India? What was the alleged financial motive there, according to the source?
That situation is viewed through the lens of the POW network attempting to control or vassalize India.
Why India?
Because India is a rising economic power, a key member of BRICS, and increasingly charting its own course. The POW network, in this view, needs to keep India contained or dependent.
So the conflict or tension is used as leverage.
Yes. Destabilization campaigns, border skirmishes using Pakistan as a foil, all seen as tools to pressure India, maybe push it towards needing IMF loans, debt slavery, or force it into security alliances that benefit the Western military-industrial complex. Though the analysis notes this strategy is proving less effective now with the rise of BRICS providing alternatives.
Okay, now we have to address the most explosive part of this section, the interpretation of the Middle East, specifically the events around October 7th.
Yes, this is extremely sensitive and highly controversial.
The source uses terms like false flag and hostage swap operation. We need to be crystal clear. We are reporting on the analysis presented in the source material. We are not endorsing these specific controversial labels or claims ourselves.
Absolutely. It's crucial to understand we're outlining the source's argument, which connects these events directly to financial and geopolitical shifts, not just political ones.
So how does the source justify using such loaded terms? What's the financial outcome it points to?
The justification rests entirely on the predicted outcome being financially advantageous for the POW network's managed transition. It's outcome-based reasoning.
And what is that outcome?
Two main things, according to the source. First, the events served to turn Israel, previously a key U.S. regional proxy, into more of a pariah state globally, weakening its strategic value in the old configuration.
And second,
To turn America itself into a more isolated state on the world stage due to its unconditional support, thereby forcing the next phase of regional negotiation,
which is
the rebuild phase. The analysis argues the destruction was a necessary precursor to the highly profitable reconstruction contracts.
So the goal is to facilitate a U.S. slow retreat from direct dominance and allow the financial vassalization of the whole Levant region, including Israel, into the orbit of the stronger GCC economic bloc, especially after China brokered that Iran-Saudi deal.
That's the core argument. And the source points to what it sees as concrete evidence of this shift from military profit to financial reconstruction profit.
Such as?
The existence of a U.S.-submitted Gaza reconstruction plan, reportedly developed by Tony Blair's Institute. A plan which, the analysis highlights, explicitly includes aims to tokenize Gaza.
Tokenize Gaza, like put assets on a blockchain as part of the rebuild.
That's the implication, turning the reconstruction itself into a digitally managed financial asset class. And furthermore, the analysis points directly to the involvement of Trump's family.
Jared Kushner.
Yes, highlighting his known investments and plans for major real estate developments, potentially including Trump Towers in Gaza and across the reformed Middle East.
So the family is positioned to profit directly from the reconstruction phase that follows the destruction phase.
That's presented as the ultimate proof of the financial motive driving the geopolitical maneuvering. Destruction clears the way for lucrative rebuilding contracts managed by the financial industrial complex.
And Trump taking credit for ending a brief 12-day war with Iran is seen as
pure political theater, necessary optics. The source suggests Iran essentially played along, providing the narrative needed for the U.S. financial industrial complex domestically, while Iran continues its own strategic realignment towards the brisk GCC sphere. Everyone gets the optics they need for the next phase.
Let's quickly revisit Ukraine through this financial racket lens. Trump's sudden pivot to supporting Ukraine winning, the source calls it an ITYS moment.
Right, ITYS, I told you so.
But the I told you so isn't aimed at helping Ukraine.
Not according to this analysis. It's aimed squarely at reluctant European NATO allies.
To do what?
To use the perceived threat and Sub's tough stance to pressure them into massively increasing their defense spending. Not just to the 2% NATO target, but maybe pushing for 3%, 4%, even 5% of their GDP.
Spending on
U.S. military hardware. Lockheed, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. It's seen as a sales pitch for the U.S. military-industrial complex, disguised as support for Ukraine.
So the entire war, in this view, is a multi-level financial operation.
Yes. Crash Europe's industrial competitiveness via energy costs. Force them to buy expensive U.S. energy, force them to buy expensive U.S. weapons.
While assets in weakened European economies get scooped up cheaply.
Potentially by firms like BlackRock, yes. The source mentions acquiring assets for things like AI data centers, taking advantage of the deindustrialization. It cements Europe's vassal status to the U.S.-led POW network, buying the dollar more time. Okay, so now we connect all these global maneuvers, these geopolitical plays back home, to the domestic situation.
Specifically, how engineered crises are used to justify building a domestic command and control state.
Exactly. The source takes the example of the crisis often reported at the southern U.S. border, the uncontrolled migration issue.
And interprets it not as just a policy failure, but as engineered civil unrest.
That's the claim, engineered to generate public rage and fear.
Why? What does that achieve for the POW network?
It creates the perfect political climate. The public, driven by fear, starts demanding stronger controls, more surveillance, a crackdown. They demand the very command and control state that the network wants to implement.
The analysis points out the irony in Trump's rhetoric here, doesn't it? Blaming gangs like MS-13, drug cartels.
Deep irony, yes, because the source material's underlying premise is that black operations, things like CIA involvement in drug and human trafficking, have historically been part of the POW network's own covert funding mechanisms for decades.
So he's essentially blaming the symptoms created by the system he operates within.
To justify implementing the next stage of that system's control apparatus. That's the interpretation.
And the solution, often proposed mass detention, swift deportation.
Leads directly to profit for specific industries highlighted in the analysis.
The private prison industry.
Exactly. Companies like GEO Group, Core Civic, formerly CCA. The analysis argues this border crisis narrative directly fuels massive government contracts and profits for these corporations. It's a crisis profit loop.
Ultimately, though, the goal isn't just prisons. The source argues the endgame is a full-blown totalitarian technocracy.
That's the destination described. A system built on 3 technological pillars.
AI, social credit scores, and
Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
And these 3 together allow what?
They codify control, as the source puts it, absolute granular control over society and individual economic activity.
Is the technology ready for this?
The analysis argues yes, absolutely. It specifically traces the development lineage, pointing fingers at companies like Palantir. Early funding reportedly came from CIA venture capital arms, Peter Thiel. Even Jeffrey Epstein is mentioned in the source material as being involved in the periphery of these networks.
And this tech has been field tested.
Extensively, the source claims, using conflict zones like Gaza and Ukraine as proving grounds. Real-world testing of surveillance, tracking, targeting, data analysis systems.
And now it's being deployed domestically.
Rapidly. The analysis cites things like the push for digital IDs in the UK, the increasing use of surveillance tech and data fusion centers, even concepts like quick reaction forces in the US, as precursors or components of this incoming technocratic grid.
Which puts Trump's call in his speech for an AI verification system for biological weapons into a different light.
Completely. It's presented not as a genuine arms control proposal, but as part of the plan to accelerate the public acceptance and global adoption of the very AI-driven surveillance and identity verification infrastructure needed for the wider control system.
Normalizing the tech under a plausible security pretext?
Exactly. Whether it's verifying identities to prevent bioweapon proliferation, or verifying identities to access your CBDC account or cross a digital border, the underlying tech is the same.
Okay, let's pivot one last time here to the energy narrative. The analysis calls the whole climate change discussion the greatest conge job ever perpetrated. Very strong language.
Extremely strong, and again, focused entirely on the alleged financial motives.
How does climate rhetoric, whether it's cooling, warming, or just change, serve the financial industrial complex, specifically BlackRock in this analysis?
By providing the perfect justification to manipulate massive capital flows, trillions of dollars.
Through ESG, environmental, social, governance metrics.
Precisely. ESG is framed as the tool. By creating these metrics, asset managers like BlackRock can steer investment away from disfavored industries, like traditional energy, unless they own it, and into favored ones, like green tech, which they also heavily invest in. It allows them to pick winners and losers on a global scale based on their portfolio needs, all under the cover of saving the planet.
And this green scam, as the source calls it, has specific geopolitical targets.
2 main ones identified: Europe, particularly Germany, and China.
How does it target Europe, Germany?
By forcing them, through political pressure and ESG mandates, to shut down reliable, cheap energy sources like nuclear power and Russian natural gas.
Which forces them to buy
expensive alternatives, primarily U.S. LNG. This deindustrializes their economies, making heavy manufacturing uncompetitive.
turning them into
Cheaper locations for less energy-intensive industries, like the AI data centers the tech giants need. Europe becomes a dependent digital colony in this view.
And the flip side, China.
While the West engages in this self-inflicted energy austerity, China continues to be the world's largest consumer of coal and oil, massively expanding its industrial and manufacturing base.
So the POW network profits both ways.
That's the argument. Asset managers hedge their bets. They profit from the managed decline and asset stripping of the West, facilitated by ESG, and they profit from the rise of China's manufacturing dominance, often by owning stakes in those industries too. It's presented as a carefully managed global arbitrage.
Which means Trump's drill baby drill rhetoric, opening the North Sea, etc., isn't about energy independence.
Not in this framework. It's about switching asset class focus for profit maximization within the POW network.
Explain that.
As the global petrodollar system unwinds and overseas influence wanes, the network needs to maximize revenue from the assets it can still control directly, namely domestic and regionally controlled energy resources.
So it signals a shift from profiting globally via the petrodollar to profiting regionally via direct extraction and energy dominance.
Exactly. It's an asset optimization strategy for the financial industrial complex, dressed up in the language of national interest and EGA, making up for lost revenue streams abroad by doubling down on extraction at home.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of complex and, frankly, quite dark analysis here.
It's a heavy framework, no doubt.
So, pulling it all together, the big picture, painted by the source, is one where this proof of weapons network is actively cannibalizing the West.
That's a good way to put it. Cannibalizing the West for its own profit to manage the inevitable decline of the dollar's global dominance and transition smoothly into a new multipolar world order where they still retain significant control, just configured differently.
And Trump's role, his rhetoric, Medjie, nationalism, America first, it's all seen as
A necessary narrative cloak, a performance. The story needed to sell this geopolitical reset and the associated economic policies, like tariffs, energy policy, to the domestic population.
policies that ultimately benefit his faction, the financial industrial complex, as they strategically retreat and reconfigure their portfolios.
That's the core assertion. It's not about making America great in a traditional sense. It's about managing the decline profitably for the network insiders.
The ultimate takeaway, then, is that the U.S. is no longer viewed by this analysis as the undisputed global hegemon.
No. It's portrayed as retreating, consolidating into more of a regional power. While global power genuinely shifts towards competing blocs, BRICS, China, the GCC.
And since the drivers of this, the K-shaped economy, the accelerating fiscal dominance are presented as unstoppable through traditional political means.
Like voting.
Right. The analysis shifts focus entirely at the end, onto the individual listener.
Yes. It becomes about your personal exit strategy, because waiting for the system to fix itself or voting for a different manager within the same system is seen as futile.
Preparation is framed as essential.
Crucial. Because you can't vote your way out of a sovereign debt crisis or systemic monetary debasement. That's the hard truth presented.
This is where the source introduces the orange pill solution.
Yes, borrowing the term from Bitcoin culture. It signifies waking up to the reality of the financial system.
And the path forward it recommends is personal sovereignty. How does one achieve that, according to this analysis?
Through decisive financial action. Actions aimed at decoupling yourself from the failing system. 3 main steps are outlined.
Step 1.
Boycott the Federal Reserve, which essentially means opting out of the dollar system as your primary means of saving wealth.
How?
By moving your long-term savings into assets outside their direct control, which leads to step 2.
Okay, step 2.
Boycott BlackRock and the banks, or at least minimize your dependence on them as custodians of your wealth.
To move savings into
Neutral, fixed supply, non-state assets. The source specifically emphasizes gold and Bitcoin. Assets whose value isn't dependent on government promises or central bank printing presses.
But there's a crucial distinction made about how you hold Bitcoin.
Absolutely critical. The analysis warns strongly against holding Bitcoin through traditional financial instruments like ETFs,
Why?
because doing so leaves your asset within the control of the very banking and asset management system, the POW network, you're trying to gain sovereignty from. They become the custodian, you just have an IOU.
So true sovereignty requires
Bitcoin held in self-custody, where you control the private keys. Only then is it truly outside the reach of the banks and the network. That's the core of the orange pill insight for personal finance in this context.
Okay. And the third component of personal sovereignty.
Manage debt. Actively. The system runs on debt. Your debt is their asset.
So reduce personal debt where possible.
Yes, and the analysis even controversially suggests that for some, strategically reducing or even defaulting on certain types of debt might become a necessary defensive financial maneuver as the debt-based Ponzi scheme accelerates towards its conclusion. A provocative idea, but part of the framework.
The underlying message seems to be starve the beast.
Precisely. The enemy is identified as the Paudo network, its primary vulnerability. It needs your money, your participation, your savings, your debt to function.
So your real vote
Is where you store your wealth, where you place your economic energy. That's presented as far more impactful than a ballot vote within the existing structure.
So, to wrap this whole intense analysis up, Trump's UN speech, in this view, wasn't just a speech.
No, it was the narrative performance required. The story needed to rationalize the massive global power shift already underway, the managed decline of the dollar, and the simultaneous implementation of a domestic command and control surveillance state.
All while the big asset managers are busy optimizing their portfolios to profit from every stage of this transition.
It's presented as a calculated, ruthless financial maneuver, brilliantly disguised as old-fashioned geopolitics and nationalism.
What's truly fascinating, or perhaps disturbing, is the idea that the history books we read later might tell a very different story than the one being spun now.
They almost certainly will if this analysis holds true. The financial machinations will eventually surface. The source ends on a provocative note for the listener.
Which is,
You are alive right now during one of the most pivotal, chaotic, and potentially opportune financial transitions in modern history. Maybe ever.
exciting and terrifying, as you said earlier.
Exactly. And so the final question this analysis leaves you with is stark. Are you consciously making the decision now to understand this, to prepare your assets, to secure your personal sovereignty?
Or are you passively letting the collapsing system, the POW network, decide your financial fate for you?
That's the choice it puts before you.
A powerful and incredibly urgent question indeed. Thank you for guiding us through this complex, and I agree, often disturbing framework from Bitcoin Hard Talk.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. We hope this deep dive helps you, the listener, make sense of the source material, maybe explore it further, and figure out what your own orange pill of preparation might look like.
Because ultimately, understanding these underlying financial flows, recognizing the engineered narratives for what they are, that's presented as the only real way to avoid being just a useful idiot, as the source bluntly puts it, caught in the gears of the proof of weapons network's grand game. Knowledge, in this context, really is power.